And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, and today on the show, hold on. I am Lakers insider for Lakers Daily, Anthony Irwin. That is actually my official name. I changed it. I went to town hall, and I told those kind folks over there, hey, I take my job very, very seriously. And from now on, I am Anthony Irwin, comma, Lakers insider for Lakers Daily. Please put that on my driver's license, put that on my social security card. It was a whole to do, and here we stand with that now being my official title. Sure hope I never lose that job. All right. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about Anthony Davis and the season that he is coming off of, a truly spectacular season. Like, the more that I did my digging in on this show or for this show, the more blown away I was by the season that Anthony Davis had, and the more frustrated I got. I know that's not gonna exactly shock you guys to find that out, that would be kind of the next step that I take, and just kind of marveling at the season that Anthony Davis had. But it does feel kind of shitty that the Lakers have so cynically basically told Anthony Davis, hey, bud, you're our defense, and asked him to operate as such. And to watch him basically, do what he has to hold that defense together, kind of like Spider-Man holding the two halves of the ship together. It has been incredible to watch. And they're going to be asking him to do that again, because as I've been talking about, this appears to be the roster that the Lakers are going to be having going into next season. But yeah, let's talk about Anthony Davis's season. Let's talk about the season that the Lakers are hoping that Anthony Davis has again. And we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, as well as I asked for some Anthony Davis questions to those of you who follow me on Twitter. So without any further ado, let's dive on in. So the box score is pretty incredible in and of itself, but I still feel like it doesn't tell the full story. Anthony Davis played in 76 games last year. That is the most that he has ever played in an NBA season. He scored 24 points, or just under 25 points a game. He grabbed, 12 and a half rebounds per game, 3 of them being of the offensive variety. He shot 82% basically from the free throw line on 7 attempts per game. Now, I would like to see a few more attempts there, but the percentage would indicate that he is still a capable shooter. From the 3-point line, he took a step forward from there last year. He attempted 0.1 more attempts per game, but did make 27% of those 3-pointers. And it sometimes looked kind of comfortable shooting them. His effective field goal percentage, hovered at about 570 or so. That's okay. It's pretty good, I would say. I actually kind of liked that he was willing to risk that effective field goal percentage with some of the shots that he was willing to take. I thought he was a more willing shooter last year, and that made him a more dangerous player overall. All of this is to say, doesn't really tell much of the story on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, you could point to the blocks per game, 2.5 basically blocks per game last year. You could point to the steals per game, 1.2 steals per game. You could point to the fact that the Lakers weren't a complete abomination always on defense. And you could try to, kind of sum up the story that way. But what Anthony Davis was asked to do on the defensive side of the ball is just insane. And I've found it really funny. And I'm going to play a clip from the volume in which Colin Cowherd kind of lends a voice. I don't know if he's doing this on purpose, but I think he lends his voice to a phenomenon that I have noticed as people have realized, oh yeah, that's right, Anthony Davis is actually pretty good when he's not asked to carry a defense with D'Angelo Russell, LeBron James at times, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves. The Lakers, remember, didn't have their point of attack defenders. Gabe Vincent wasn't available last year. Jared Vanderbilt wasn't available last year for chunks of the season. So the defense was Anthony Davis last season. And I think some people kind of started wondering, like, how good is he actually on defense? He did finally he was a finalist last year for Defensive Player of the Year. So that was, I think, an improvement over the previous year where he was not mentioned in that kind of class of defender. But I'm just going to play this clip. Again, this is from the volume. This is Colin Cowherd talking about Anthony Davis and how he thought of AD previously and how he now thinks of him, especially as the Olympics are going on.
I was so anti-AD when we started doing this podcast together. I went like 2 years. I'm like, it's a dad bod. He doesn't work out. He's out of shape. He never plays hurt. Take Jokic out. I'm not sure there's a big I'd take over him, including Giannis. You cannot mistake Anthony Davis in a game. Dominant defender. He's gotten significantly more physical to me. I don't know what happened. This is the AD we thought we were getting out of college, and he just wasn't emotionally ready for it.
The reason why we're seeing him be so physical.
I apologize to Jason. I could probably continue playing that clip. I think Jason talks about Anthony Davis about as effectively as anybody else that I do this alongside. Nice meeting Jason too in Vegas. It was great. I got to have him on the show again sometime soon. But all of that stuff that Colin Cowherd was talking about, the dad bod stuff. And now look, I have also wondered after the, and I wondered this in part because of some of what I've heard behind the scenes, but I have at times wondered about Anthony Davis's conditioning after they won the championship. Now, people closer to Anthony Davis would say that he bulked up in order to play center. People who don't quite view things that same way say that he got a little comfortable after winning a championship, and that's where the dad bod comment comes in. Regardless, though, he has, I think, his athleticism has had previously kind of diminished a little bit, and this year, I think this offseason, he's really focused on slimming down a little bit in hopes that the Lakers would go out and get a center. I think he's kind of forcing their hand. I think he basically said, like, I can't carry that extra poundage on my body. I can't carry those extra lbs and still be the effective player, the most effective version of myself, even though last year was one of his best seasons ever. I think he's kind of forcing their hand and saying, like, look, I'll play center and I'll play the vast majority of my minutes, but I'm going to do so in this way that allows me to be a little bit lighter on my feet. And please go out and get me a center, whether that's finding out Christian Wood or Jackson Hayes is that center next year, or go out and I think next year, I wouldn't be surprised if Jonas Valanciunas eventually becomes a Laker. It's kind of annoying because they could have probably just had him in free agency and didn't. But I do kind of think, like, you watch him in these Olympic Games, and that is where that conversation has now steered back to, holy shit, this dude is incredible. Anthony Davis, as with most bigs, Jokic is in kind of a category unto himself because he brings the ball up the court. He operates at the top of the key. He's this great facilitator. Jokic is very different from other bigs in that, like, he doesn't require a guard to get him the ball all the time. He doesn't require his team to get him the ball all of the time. Anthony Davis very much does. It does take somebody feeding him in order for AD to get the ball. Same goes for Embiid and your typical bigs. Like, that is the one thing that kind of hinders their impact at times, is how capable is that team at getting that player, that big, the ball as often as they need to get it. And, so offensively, that's where the frustration sometimes comes in, where with AD, where he's having this incredible game. He scores, 23 in the first half, and he looks like, holy shit, he's going to go for 50. He's just absolutely dominating the game. And then you look up in the second half and he shot like 5 times. That's where sometimes that can obviously become a source of frustration with Anthony Davis. But and I think he shares some of that culpability there. I think the bigger issue there is that Darvin Ham wasn't a very good coach, and his point guard is D'Angelo Russell, who doesn't really see the game or think the game in a way that like you want your point guard to think the game through if your big is Anthony Davis, and you need to keep that guy involved from start to finish. And all of this is to say that like if AD is on a team with players who aren't very good at getting him the ball and who also aren't very good defensively, and Anthony Davis is like, again, asked to hold the ship together with a few strings of spider web, that is going to diminish kind of how he looks on a night by night basis. And I think that's where some of that frustration, pops in. And especially over the last, the previous 2 years where, Anthony Davis played 46 games in the 22-23 season. He played 40 games in the 21-22 season. Even the 2020-21 season, he played 36, but that was a shortened season as well. But his availability, right, hasn't been exactly up to standard all the time. He doesn't like if he gets hurt, you're going to see it, right? There was the scare that we had in the last Olympic game where I think it was Wenyan Gabriel came down on AD's foot, and AD like hung behind the play and kind of like grimaced and I do think that there are some questions about his pain tolerance level compared to some of his peers, right? Like I think Jokic, his conditioning is a direct result of like an insane pain tolerance. The guy's always bleeding and you just would never know it. But I do think though that, when you see AD in the setting that the Lakers have kind of put him in especially last year, where he has no other good defenders, basically because of the injuries to Gabe Vincent and to Jared Vanderbilt, that's going to, make the defense look worse around him. And if he's making his greatest impact on that side of the ball, people are going to be like, well, how good is he actually if the Lakers are barely mediocre defensively? Not taking the next step to ask like, wait, how is a defense with D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves as its backcourt even mediocre defensively, let alone one with like Rui Hachimura, who you watch him play defense and sometimes he looks great, but other times he's a complete space cadet. And then another guy there is LeBron James, who is going to be 40 next year and isn't the same kind of defender on the play-by-play basis that he probably needs to be in order to lighten the load on Anthony Davis. So everybody kind of looks at the Lakers defense and it's like, well, they're barely mediocre. How could he possibly figure into the defensive player of the year conversations? Again, not taking the next step of like, actually, he probably needs to be, because it's a fucking miracle that the Lakers are even mediocre defensively. But then you see him on a team with like Bam Adebayo, and you see him with Anthony Edwards, and you see him with Derek White, and you see him with a LeBron James who actually can focus for every possession defensively that he's on the court, because he's playing fewer minutes. He's playing out there with Jason Tatum, and he's playing out there like with just all NBA talent on both sides of the ball. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. If Anthony Davis just needs to operate as kind of your ceiling raiser, not your floor maintainer, then Anthony Davis is going to be one of the absolute greatest ceiling risers in the history of the sport. He's an incredible finisher in the pick and roll. He is an absolute black hole in the middle of the defense where, when Anthony Davis is functioning at his highest level, teams just don't try to do anything in the key. And like the best example of that was not the best, but one of the best recent examples was what he did in that Memphis series, where Ja Morant, the game's best athlete, the game's most explosive finisher, the guy who is capable of the coolest highlights, basically started shooting 15-foot floaters, because if he got anywhere near the rim, Anthony Davis was there to swallow him, like swallow those plays whole. You hear the pause there? And it was just that's something to marvel at when Anthony Davis is allowed to function in that way. But when the Lakers basically tell him, "Hey, bud, you're the defense," it forces him to, become kind of a master of none, great at a bunch of things, but not exactly like the same kind of, ceiling riser potential that you see him play with in these Olympics. And that, I think, is a direct that is having a direct impact on the way that people are talking about him. It also helps in this setting that the guy starting above him has mostly been Joel Embiid, who looks like Fat Thor out there. That obviously helps because Anthony Davis is coming in and the game immediately changes because they are no longer needing to drag Joel Embiid's waterlogged corpse up and down the court. That certainly is playing a part in the way that we're seeing things with AD. But like, I have spent so much time, these Olympics, basically looking at what AD has been capable of on both sides of the ball, and just like kind of rolling my eyes at, like, gosh, man, it would be nice if he had one other like legitimately good NBA presence in the starting and closing lineups that he just doesn't have right now. Austin at least tries on the defensive side of the ball, but he's a 6'3" skinny white guy. Like, that guy's not going to do much defensively for you. He's going to try, but you're going to be thankful for every little bit of impact that you can get from him. D'Angelo Russell is D'Angelo Russell. He's not a good defensive player. LeBron James on a Wednesday night against, a mid-tier opponent is going to be an actively bad defensive player. And then, you never know what you're going to get from Rui, depending on what he's going to do for you in scoring wise. Like, a lot of times Rui's scoring is going to dictate how well he is going to play defensively or in doing those little things. And if those are the other four guys that Anthony Davis is on the court with at the beginning of games and at the close of games, that's going to really, hinder what AD is going to be able to do on either side of the ball, but especially defensively, where he is basically just always asked to clean up messes. And, I'm a parent. I feel a lot more effective in that role if I'm able to stay ahead of the mess rather than having to react to every single time my son is climbing on something he shouldn't be climbing on. And I'm able to be more proactive if Jen is there to help watch some of that stuff too. But if I'm there by myself and I'm in charge of all of the messes, I'm a much worse parent. Like, just being upfront. Like, today I had to watch my niece and my two children, so I was completely outnumbered, and I don't think it did a very good job. Like, I'm going to be honest, I was the worst version of myself as a parent that you will ever see from me. I tried, and I think I did an okay job given the circumstances, but that, like, I was running around the house today making sure nobody died, and I felt like Anthony Davis on the defensive side of the ball for the Lakers, where I feel like Anthony Davis is like constantly running around making sure nobody dies. So, looking ahead, what can we hope for from AD? Well, certainly, if he isn't able to, at the very least, replicate the season that he had last year, the Lakers are going to be a significantly worse team because they didn't make any additions to the roster to make up for any potential steps back from either LeBron or AD. And people would say, like, this is what I always get in my mentions. Well, if any team has a step back from either of their two best players, that team is going to be significantly worse. Well, sure, yeah, but other teams tend to do a little bit better job than the Lakers did this offseason at trying to supplement their stars so that those guys don't always have to put together Herculean efforts to beat, like, the Portland Trailblazers on a Thursday in February. Like that's that's the difference there. But the Lakers are very much like they have a lot riding, everything essentially riding on Anthony Davis, at the very least replicating last season. And maybe, just maybe, Jared Vanderbilt is more available next year, and that helps the defense. Maybe, just maybe, Gabe Vincent is available next year, and that helps the defense. But if all you're basically, if the only thing that you're hoping for in what the difference is from last year to next is the health and availability of Gabriel Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, that's not ideal. It just isn't. And so when you're looking ahead to the season that Anthony Davis needs to have, in order for the Lakers to be title relevant, he probably needs to be a little bit better in some spots. I do think, getting to the free throw line a little bit more would be nice. He gets a shit whistle, but it would be nice to see him get to the free throw line a little bit more. It would be nice to see him, Darvin Ham started last media day by saying he was hoping to see AD shoot. He was like 6 or 8 3-pointers a game, rather infamously. Didn't get anywhere near there, but I would like to see AD shoot at least 2 3-pointers a game. He's one of those kinds of shooters where the more he shoots, I think the better shooter he's going to become. I think he takes, like, I've never spoken to Anthony. Well, take that back. If I've had a conversation, with or around Anthony Davis, it's been in passing. It's been rather quick. I can't even pretend to know the guy personally, but from what I have seen from him on the court, and when he goes to the sideline, he takes mistakes very hard. He doesn't like making mistakes, and he doesn't like seeing his teammates make the same mistake over and over and over again. And I think that can kind of apply to him as a shooter, where you look at him shoot. Raj says it all the time. He has one of the prettiest jumpers that just doesn't go in for whatever reason. And I really think it's a repetition thing. I really think that Anthony Davis would benefit from allowing himself to miss a little bit more often. Take the occasional 3-pointer, and don't let that water run off, duck feathers when you miss the occasional 3-pointer. The line that my dad always used to give me when he was coaching me as a basketball player, I was a shooter. And he just always used to tell me, be a stupid shooter, right? You got to be a goldfish. The last shot that you just took, if it went in, remember that. If it didn't, fuck it, move on. And I really think that, Anthony Davis on the offensive side of the ball becomes a little bit too risk averse with his shot selection. And I know nerds love that stuff and say that, they don't want to see him take more shots that would make him less effective. I think that's a very borderline cynical way of seeing the sport that I just don't think it's fine for video games. I don't think in practice is great. And I would like to see Anthony Davis miss a few more shots. So that would be one thing that I would like to see from him a little bit more next year. And then, it's going to be interesting to see what JJ Redick has in mind for the Lakers next year, where I think, mixing things up more than Darvin was willing to mix things up. Let AD switch defensively more often than Darvin had AD switching. It doesn't mean that you're taking away the deep drop or any kind of drop coverage from AD, because that's also a very effective way at times to use him. Play AD with Wood a little more often than we got last year, or Hayes for that matter, or ideally a better big, but I just don't know if that's going to happen before the beginning of next season. So I would like to see a little bit more, versatility isn't the worst word or isn't the word to use here, because I don't think I'm asking Anthony Davis specifically to be more versatile. Creativity on both sides of the ball with AD, and we have heard JJ talk about on offense how he wants to use AD as more of a hub at times. I think it'll be more effective in the post where those reads are a little bit more straightforward. I don't think Anthony Davis is the offensive player to just let him operate in the high post in the way that like Denver does with Jokic. I think that would be a step too far in that direction with AD on offense. But certainly, if you do, I like short roll stuff, allow AD to, I would like to see AD set more screens and actually make contact on those screens, and then get the ball in the short roll and have nice, easy reads to where if the help is off of the corner shooter over there, hit the corner shooter. If the help is coming off of the guy in the dunker spot, then hit the dunker spot. If there is no help there, AD is a great floater shooter. Shoot that floater, in that like 5 to 7 foot range, or even better, go and dunk on a bunch of fools. That's great too. So like that's one way I would like to see AD used more. But if you are going to use him as like a post hub, that I think he can also operate that way. One thing to always watch. This is like the one thing I'm always keeping an eye on with Anthony Davis as an offensive player is his shoulders. And if you think of like drawing a line from one shoulder to another, and the more often AD's shoulders, that line that you're running connecting those two shoulders runs parallel to the ground, the more effective offensive player he is going to be, both as a scoring threat himself, but especially as a passer. Like you anytime you watch AD and he gets double teamed or he gets trapped and he goes back onto his back foot, and you start to see that front shoulder creep up a little bit, and he now is throwing kind of like a fadeaway pass. One, the pass isn't going to have enough zip on it because he doesn't have the proper technique to throw that kind of a pass. And also, the read is going to be a lot safer in a way that like doesn't take advantage of the trap. And then finally, like that pass tends to be a little bit more errant, and you'll see passes down at guys' feet. You'll see them have to like reset to go and catch it so that the pass isn't hitting them in the shooting pocket. Like all of those things, wind up really affecting AD as a facilitator too. And that's something that like, all right, if the Lakers are going to use him as a hub, whether it's in the high or the low post, then AD really needs to focus on keeping those shoulders nice and parallel to the ground. That line that is being nice and parallel to the ground, so that he is more effective no matter what his decision is out of those spots as operating as a hub. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some of your guys' questions, starting with Brandon Oeming, who left a starred comment, which means... Gosh, I love that thing. I know you guys don't love it, but I do, so it's sticking around. Brandon Oeming writes, honestly, is it worth giving up our future knowing Bron is going to retire in the next few years? I'm a little skeptical about doing it. Well, the thing there is that like you still have AD. Like this whole podcast is about Anthony Davis, and he is in the middle of his prime and will still be in his prime if LeBron retires at the end of this year or next year or the one after that. Like AD is still going to be at or near the pinnacle of excuse me. Wow, that came out of nowhere. The pinnacle of his powers. And so so long as you have, in my opinion, a top 5 to 10 talent on your team, it behooves you to maximize that title window while you have that 5 to 10 talent. In the Lakers case, they have 2 of them. And I would like to see, like, it just drives all of us insane that the Lakers have basically pushed out on optimizing that title window while they've had them. They've loved selling the tickets. They've loved selling the jerseys. They've loved the attention that AD and LeBron have brought to the organization. And it's been, again, rather cynical to watch them just kind of ride that out, while Rob Pelinka tells us all about how they're focused on the future and developing the future and all of those things, which should not be your focus, while those two guys are such key parts of your organization. And especially Anthony Davis. Like, it's one thing, I kind of understand it, not really, but I understand it a little bit more with LeBron, where he's gonna be 40 next year, and it's hard to wrap your mind around, like, what essentially what the Lakers are the most terrified of is going all in, using those trade chips, pushing those chips into the middle of the table, optimizing the roster, optimizing this title window, and then LeBron gets hurt, and you're sitting here saying, like, well, what did you think was going to happen? You were pushing the chips into the middle of the table with LeBron James. And I think, like, especially the last couple of years, Rob and the rest of the organization has basically been looking at LeBron and being like, yeah, like, it's great that you're still doing this, but it's hard to actually gamble on that. It's like if you're at a roulette table and you're putting all of your money on either red or black. I prefer black. And like, black hits 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. And you're sitting there like, man, do I still keep putting, like, am I letting it ride still on black, or do I start kind of limiting the potential damage here? And I think the Lakers are still kind of weary or a little nervous about continuing to bet this thing that keeps on coming up in their favor. LeBron's holding off of Father Time has continued to come up in their favor, but they haven't quite maximized that experience because they are now kind of nervous about continuing to bet on that being the case. And I think I kind of get it a little bit with LeBron. I don't get it with Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is barely turning 30, or is barely turning, or on the other side of 30, whatever he is. They have had him for his actual prime. And last season was a pinnacle type season from Anthony Davis that went mostly wasted. All right, let's look at, I asked for questions from Twitter. So let's go here. I'm going to look for the ones that I got first. Laker for Life 8 writes, how many games do you see AD playing this year? Well, look, I'm not going to try to, have any special talent when it comes to predicting health, so I'm not going to go that far. But I do think that AD wants to be eligible for those end of season awards. Means you have to at least play 65. So in that, like, 65 to 70 game range, if he is healthy, would be, I think, the goal for him. And I think also, like, a fair goal from the Lakers, where, even if he's healthy, you give him the occasional night off, and yeah, it probably means that you lose that game because the Lakers are terrible without him. But in that, like, 65 to 70 game range, I think would be what I would be kind of hoping for. Any more than that would be cool, but I think you run the risk of diminishing returns. The next question here comes from Legoat, which was Shariah Walla 97, who asked, any talks inside the Lakers about AD at the 4? Well, like, yeah, like those talks are coming from him. Like, Anthony Davis is telling the Lakers, I want to play less center. Like, and by the way, like, I kind of get it. Like, I really actually kind of do. I wish the Lakers were more equipped to allow AD to play a little bit less center. I still think his most effective position is center. And I still think that because of the shooting concerns, he needs to be mostly a center. But, you sprinkle it in, you have some really big lineups there with him at the 4 and another 5 next to him. And like Rui or Vanderbilt at the 3 to help with your kind of overall athleticism. It's hard to have AD at the 4 and Vanderbilt at the 3, without having an absolute knockdown 3-point shooter at the center spot. You're going to run into some real shooting concerns there. So maybe you would have like Rui at the 3, or last year with the way that LeBron shot the ball, you could have him at the 3 in some of those lineups. But yeah, in terms of like conversations within the Lakers, I've been told all summer that the Lakers at AD's request are looking for ways to play him a little bit less at center than he has the last couple of years, which has a lot to, which is somewhat a result of the way that he has slimmed down this summer, where he's just like, look, I'm slimming down. I want to be more explosive. Look, as somebody who has lost a bunch of weight in the last, 6 months or so, my joints feel a lot better. I actually mowed the lawn tonight before I recorded this. Like I'm in good enough shape to where like I was able to go out there. It was like 90 something degrees at 8:00 at night. And I had, was able to go out there and mow the lawn nice and quickly. We live on about like half an acre and we have like a bit of a hill. So normal, like last year, if I would have done that, I wouldn't have been able to record this show, or the show wouldn't have gone nearly as well as this one has gone so far. So I can speak to the improvement on your joints that comes with having less poundage, on them, in both senses of the word. And I do think that, AD basically went about slimming up a little bit this offseason and told the Lakers, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Hopefully Christian is up to playing more center with me next year, or you're able to go out and get somebody who fits in that mold next to me. But this is the deal. And I get it. I get it from AD's perspective, and I hope the Lakers are able to execute on it. Let's look at some of the live comments here. And yeah, so people asking Lakers rumors, anything new, what happened to the Grant trade, all that from patron sent. Look, I I don't have anything new to report. I have a piece coming hopefully soon, I think in the next few days or so, for Lakers Daily, kind of talking about 3 major factors that led to the Lakers not being able to do anything. Why you mad, bro? Also asking about Jeremy Grant. Do you think the holdup on Grant's trade appears to be Connect's trade eligibility because they were high on him? No, the Lakers don't want to trade anything beyond 1 first rounder for Jeremy Grant. And I get it. Like the Portland Trailblazers themselves, like I talked to an executive. Who was that one? The scout? I forget. A lot of people said this, but like one quote in particular was really good with it. Like this scout basically said, like, Portland gave up 1 first for Jeremy Grant. Why 2 years later on a bigger contract are they asking for 2 first rounders? Like that doesn't make any sense. So like that's the biggest holdup there, is that Portland and Joe Cronin basically they outline the price. They did this with Miami with Dame, and they're doing it here with the Lakers with Grant, where they basically, Rob calls up Joe. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Joe says, good. So happy to hear from you, Rob. And Rob goes, any update? What are we thinking? Still thinking, hey, we're getting close to training camp. Do you really want this guy in your camp going into next year? Joe says, yeah, I'm fine with it, so long as you aren't willing to give up the 2nd first rounder. And that's the extent of the conversation. I saw Joe and Rob talking in the hallways there at Thomas and Mack, just kind of, and not just in the hallways, but, occasionally, around the court and stuff like that. They have had plenty of conversation there, at times involving Clutch too. And, it still winds up leading right back to that same, roadblock, that is Portland wanting 2 first rounders for Jeremy Grant. and the Lakers adamantly not wanting to give up 2 first rounders for Jeremy Grant. And there are some other complicating factors there, like Portland doesn't want D'Angelo Russell. They have a bunch of guards there already, and he doesn't exactly have the kind of reputation around the league as somebody who would help groom those young guards. So they aren't interested in D'Angelo Russell. And the Lakers, I don't think, are all that interested in giving up both Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura for Jeremy Grant. I think they would like to hold on to both of those wings. So that's essentially what they keep on running into. And I've reached the point here where, you guys know me. I don't normally pull punches when it comes to this front office. I completely understand them not wanting to give up more than 1 first rounder, maybe even a first rounder for Jeremy Grant. Like that's there's some real questions there about him as a player and the mentality that he brings at this stage of his career to the court. All right, let's go back to Anthony Davis here. Let's see. Self attention layer 24. What do you see? Where do you see AD's game evolving the most next year? Also, the video is about to be 5 minutes long. Hey, we are at 41 minutes, kind fellow. All right. Look, AD is either 30 or on the other side of 30. I don't think his game is going to be evolving too much. He's just at that stage of his career where he kind of is who he is as a basketball player, which is still fine. He's still a great basketball player, but that's kind of like the issue there when you're talking about evolution of AD's game. But I was really kind of my eyebrow raised, right, when I heard JJ Redick say we kind of want to see AD as more of a hub. Last year, I don't think I don't have the splits in front of me, but there was a stat that I was keeping a close eye on over the course of the year where the Lakers were had some kind of astronomical record in terms of wins and losses and win percentage when AD had like 5 or more or 6 or more assists. And that I think is the most dangerous version of Anthony Davis because it means other guys are making shots. And then it also means that Anthony Davis is playing with some real oomph. He's drawing double teams and he's making the right reads coming out of those double teams, or he's dribbling into this is when any basketball player is playing their best basketball, especially those the primary creators, is they'll dribble themselves into trouble, knowing where that trouble is going to be coming from, and then taking advantage of the trouble once it arrives. And when AD is doing that stuff, he is like legitimately a top 3 player in the NBA. I'm not bullshitting. I swear to God. I fully 100% feel that way, where if AD is playing that kind of confident, where he's that kind of a facilitator and he's also scoring, and then you always know what he's doing on the defensive side of the ball, that is a two-way impact player that basically nobody else is capable of on planet Earth, period. And if Redick and his coaching staff are able to get more of that kind of Anthony Davis this season, that would be like a truly spectacular thing to behold. I'm not kidding. Like that would be incredible. I don't think you're going to get it more than like once every other week or so, because he has to do so much on the defensive side of the ball too. But that, to me, like if we're talking about potential evolution, him as a facilitator, I think, is where he has the most room for potential growth. All right, let's go with At LAL Prime, who asked, is this the year AD finally gets his Defensive Player of the Year award? He played incredibly well defensively last year and so far at the Olympics. So I kind of ranted and raved about this on Twitter earlier today. I've made these points in the past before, but I'll go ahead and keep on playing the hits. But I think the aspect of the game that we are still the dumbest about is defense. We don't seem to understand how to talk about it. Those people who try to talk about it from a statistical standpoint really are missing the point. I think we from a statistical standpoint, I don't think we know dick about defense. I'm not like, it's just, we don't know anywhere near enough about defense to try to define it statistically. So you got that going on. And like, for whatever reason, we have decided to make the most reductive decisions on that side of the ball when we talk about these year-end awards. And we basically just say, like, who's the center on the best defense in the league? And it's like Brook Lopez, or it's Rudy Gobert more often than not. We say, like, best defensive player on the best defensive team. And then that's the extent of the critical thinking that we do about this award. And it drives me absolutely insane. I think that approach completely ignores versatility, something that becomes even more important in the playoffs. That's why you sometimes see in the past those defensive players of the year struggle in the postseason. You would see, you'll see like that approach will lead to like Marcus Smart winning defense. Like, I at least like that was finally creative, even though I thought it was also ridiculous. I think a lot of times, like, especially with the Celtics, you just have a lot of people in NBA media, especially national NBA media, that come from the East Coast, that come from Boston, and they're going to look for any reason to crown Boston as something that they may not be in that moment. This last year, there was a special team, so I'm fine with crowning them as they needed to be crowned, as they eventually went on to be champions. But Marcus Smart should never have won a Defensive Player of the Year. The fact that Bam and AD, two of the most versatile defenders that we will ever see, have a combined 0 Defensive Player of the Year awards just really kind of speaks to how bad we are at talking about defense. And I think what it really comes down to is you have national media. Like, in order to really be able to tell the story about what's going on the defensive side of the ball, you need to watch not just that team on a nightly basis, but you need to watch that player in that defense on a nightly basis. And you wind up a lot of times having to go back and rewatch that player on that team on a nightly basis. And national media just doesn't have the time to do that. So that's going to that's going to give you issues there. Those are the issues that are going to arise in those kinds of votes. But then also, if you don't have the time, if you cover that team locally, to also go out and see what's going on for another team. So, like, if you do cover Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you watch him in that defense on a nightly basis, you're going to be swayed by all that you watch on that nightly basis. And you're not going to watch what's going on in Miami and what's going on in Milwaukee and what's going on in LA with more versatile defenders that are being asked to do more in worse defensive situations. And all of this is to say that, like, honestly, I would be perfectly fine doing away with the Defensive Player of the Year award. I just think we're so bad at talking about it that that is the award, that and Rookie of the Year are the two awards that I think we would actually improve discourse around the NBA by getting rid of the award completely and just relying on first and second team all defensive type presences. And I see people point to, like, well, What about net defensive rating, and how doesn't that tell the story? If that player is such a better defender, then of course that defense is going to be better with that defender on the court. And look, Rudy Gobert always that their defenses are always way better with Rudy Gobert on the court. It's like, that's fine, that's cool, that's fine. But if that's the extent to statistically that we're gonna like, that's how far we can get having that conversation statistically about this stuff, then we should probably like wait to come back to those conversations when we have a little bit better information statistically to work off of. And we just don't right now. So all of this is to say, like, is this going to be the year that AD gets his Defensive Player of the Year award? No, it isn't, because the Lakers are going to be bad to mediocre defensively this year again. And voters again are going to do the same damn thing that they keep on doing year in, year out, where it's the best defensive player on the best defensive team, and that player is going to get credit for playing with Anthony Edwards and as he enters his prime, and Jalen McDaniels or Jaden or whichever one is in Minnesota, and Gobert is going to win it again. And it's just going to be the same tired conversations all over again, while we ignore again the fact that the Lakers front office had a team that they knew was not good enough, didn't add to it, actually lost guys from it. And they're telling AD, hey, bud, go ahead and shoot another one of those webs out of your hands to hold this shit together, because we ain't doing shit to help you out. All right, that is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lowdown podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. A reminder to please hit that subscribe button if you guys are watching live on YouTube right now. If you guys are watching on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@LakersLounge and hit subscribe there. And then if you guys are listening in podcast form tomorrow morning, hit subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and specifically at Odyssey. I'm a company man. And then tell your friends, who respect your opinion, that you love this show. It's a great show. It's the best show, whatever you want to say. And then to those who don't respect your opinion, tell them it's the worst show. That, this guy who fights with a stuttering problem and has his voice intact like 1 out of every 3 shows is gets on there and rants and raves a little bit too much, and maybe they'll go and subscribe to the show out of spite. But that is probably going to do it here for this episode, and for this week's episodes of the Lounge. We have another week ahead of us with more previews ahead of us, and we have more Team USA games to break down as they enter the knockout phase. So we'll break those games down as well. And until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm saying have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you. Didn't need to hit that button. That was an accident. Have a good one, everybody.